this video, let us look at the trachea and the bronchial tree. So the trachea is an ovoid structure with a flattened posterior wall. All right, so this structure is supported by C-shaped cartilage rings. All right, so this is our C-shaped cartilage ring, but these rings are deficient, or they are not found posteriorly in this region. All right, that's why the trachea is flattened in that region. So we have 15 to 20 of these C-shaped hyaline cartilage rings. So since the cartilage is deficient posteriorly, we have the posterior wall being supported by a trachealis muscle and a fibroelastic sheet. The trachea, it has a characteristic respiratory mucosa where we have the respiratory epithelium. Recall the respiratory epithelium, all right, and we also have a lamina propria within the trachea. All right, so let us look at the cross section of the trachea wall. So on the luminal side we have the mucosa. All right, so this is our mucosa, which has an epithelium, the respiratory epithelium, which is pseudostratified ciliated columnar epithelium, right, with 5 cell types, namely the ciliated columnar cells, the goblet cells, the brush cells, the small granule cells, and the basal cells. Okay, and then within the lamina propria, we said we find connective tissue there. We also find the mucosa associated lymphatic tissue. All right, then deep to the mucosa we have the submucosa. All right, this submucosa contains an unusual loose connective tissue. All right, so in the submucosa we mainly find dense connective tissue, but however in the trachea the submucosa is made up of a loose connective tissue. Therefore it makes it difficult to distinguish between the lamina propria and the submucosa because they both contain the same type of connective tissue. All right, so within the submucosa we also find serous and mucous glands, and the mucosa associated lymphatic tissue, it also extends into the submucosa. All right, then from the submucosa we have a cartilage layer. So remember these C-shaped cartilage rings, we have a cartilage layer there, and this cartilage layer, remember we said that it is covered by a perichondrium. All right, this eosinophilic layer, all right, is the perichondrium, and then this is our cartilage with chondrocytes in lacunae. If you look closely you can see. So the function of the cartilage within the trachea is for support. So it provides structural support to the trachea and maintains the patency of the trachea, preventing its collapse. It also allows the trachea to have flexibility. All right, so it enables it to expand and contract during breathing without collapsing. Okay, now let us look at the bronchial tree. So the bronchial tree is made up of the bronchi to the alveoli, and when you include the trachea, it now is called the tracheobronchial tree. So we have what you call the main bronchus, this one. All right, sometimes referred to as the primary bronchus. The main bronchus on the right, it will divide to give us 3 lobar bronchi. All right, so these are the lobar bronchi. Okay, so on the right it gives us 3, and on the left it gives us 2, and then these lobar bronchi will further divide to give us tertiary bronchi or segmental bronchus. All right, so the segmental bronchi, on the right we mainly have 10, and on the left we have 8 segmental bronchi. Okay, so the segmental bronchi will further divide and give us the bronchioles. The bronchial network will continue to divide and divide until we get to the level of the terminal bronchiole, which is the smallest bronchiole within the conducting portion. All right, then we also have the respiratory bronchiole. This is now specialized for gaseous exchange. Okay, And then from the respiratory bronchial, we go to the alveolar duct, which has these sacs, which we call the alveolar sacs. And within the alveolar sacs, we have the individual alveoli themselves. Okay, so let's start with the bronchi. For the larger bronchi, or the extrapulmonary part of the bronchi, they have a similar histological structure to the trachea. And when the bronchi become intrapulmonary, that's when the cartilage rings are now replaced by the irregularly shaped cartilage plates. And we also begin to find smooth muscle within the bronchi. Okay. So the bronchi, it has 5 layers within its wall. First of all, we have the mucosa. So the mucosa, it's made up of an epithelium, or the respiratory epithelium, and a lamina propria, in which we find elastic fibers. Right. The basement membrane, it becomes thin and it will disappear in the secondary bronchi. Then after the mucosa, we find a layer of smooth muscle. So this layer is continuous in the larger bronchioles, and it is discontinuous in the smaller bronchioles. So they are just bundles of muscle fibers here and there. All right. Then within the submucosa, we find loose connective tissue with the mucus and serous glands. So these mucus and serous glands, they produce mucus, which lubricates the mucosal lining of the bronchi and also traps dust particles. Then we also find adipose tissue in the larger bronchi. Okay. Then we find cartilage within the bronchi. So this is the irregularly shaped plate of cartilage. All right. So it is different from the cartilage in the trachea, in that cartilage in the trachea is C-shaped, and then cartilage in the bronchi is irregularly shaped. And we also find smooth muscle, all right, in the muscularis layer in the bronchi. That's a distinguishing feature. So to distinguish between the bronchi and the trachea, in the bronchi we have irregularly shaped plates of cartilage and we have smooth muscle. In the trachea, we only have the cartilage. Smooth muscle is not apparent mainly. All right. Then we have bronchi associated lymphatic tissue, which is present in the lamina propria of the bronchi. All right. So this is simply mucus associated lymphatic tissue. Then let us look at the bronchioles. The bronchioles, these are next. The bronchioles, these are formed from the divisions of the bronchi, and within the bronchioles, the main distinguishing feature is that we do not find cartilage plates and we do not find glands. Okay, but however, we find a continuous circular layer of smooth muscle, and you also find elastic fibers within the lamina propria. Right. So in larger bronchioles, they are lined by a respiratory epithelium, and in smaller bronchioles, they are lined by a symbocyliated columnar epithelium. All right. And then in the terminal bronchioles, we have a symbocyliated cuboidal epithelium. So we have a transition from columnar to cuboidal epithelium within the bronchioles. All right. And then for the goblet cells, we mainly find them in the larger bronchioles, but in smaller bronchioles, they are absent. So you will see that mucus production within the bronchioles, it is becoming limited and it totally becomes absent at the level of the smaller bronchioles because the diameter of these is now too small. So presence of mucus within these small bronchioles can actually clog the bronchioles, restricting airflow. Okay. Within the epithelium of these bronchioles, we find stem cells and occasional brush cells and small granule cells. Okay. Within the terminal bronchioles, remember we said we have a ciliated cuboidal epithelium. We find cells which we refer to as the club cells or the Clara cells. Let us talk about the club cells. The club cells, They are also referred to as the bronchiolar exocrine cells. Right, these are non-ciliated and they have a dome-shaped apical end which contains the secretory granules. So the main functions of the club cells are the secretion of surfactant onto the epithelial surface. And they also produce antimicrobial peptides and cytokines for local defense. Right. They also function in detoxification of inhaled xenobiotic components. So remember that the club cells are found beginning at the level of the terminal bronchial, alright, and then they continue in the respiratory bronchioles. Okay, so now let us talk about the clinicals. First of all, we have bronchiolitis. This is simply inflammation of the bronchi, and this inflammation can actually obliterate the lumen of the bronchi, leading to closure of the lumen, alright, due to the fibrosis of the inflamed wall. Okay, and then we have asthma. And this is characterized by sudden constrictions of the smooth muscle in the bronchioles, causing what we call the bronchospasms, triggered by certain irritants. For example, cold air can actually trigger asthma. Okay, so thank you. See you in the next video.